So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vish Vishwanath. I'm a professor of health communication here at the Chan School and at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. But the reason I'm standing here is I'm also the director for the Lee Kum-Shung Center for Health and Happiness that is hosting the seminar cum webinar today. I want to welcome all of you who are in the room today, but also we have a whole group of people who are on the Zoom, on the web, so we welcome all of you. Usually, I should say, we serve food. I apologize, we ordered food, but then given everything that's going on, there is a freeze, and with the economy drive, we had to cancel our order. So I apologize in case we have advertised that there will be lunch, but because of interest of being a collective action in the entire school, we decided against it. So we have encouraged people to go out and get go to the cafeteria, and that's what we all did. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Ann Sussman. I should say, this has been, it's very fitting that she's our last speaker for the last seminar of the year. We started this year with every year when these are our monthly seminars, and every year we have a theme. So this year's theme is happiness and environment. And so we have had a series of speakers who spoke to that particular subject, an intersection of these two areas, and we have had a group of people. We are highly interdisciplinary, and the center is focused on both research as well as practice and policy. So we have had a group of people who are researchers who have been working, doing some fundamental contributions in this area, but we have also had practitioners and policymakers as a part of this. So today, I'm delighted that we have somebody who represents or who can wear all those hats if needed, depending on where you are, I guess. So Dr. Sussman is an architect, author, researcher, and teacher, passionate about understanding how buildings impact us. She serves as a president of Human Architecture and Planning Institute, thehappy.org. It's a nonprofit devoted to improving the design of the built environment through education and research. She's the author of an award-winning book called Cognitive Architecture, Designing for How We Respond to the Built Environment, which has won a number of awards. She's also the co-editor for a forthcoming book, Handbook of Neuroscience and Built Environment, which will be out in next month, in August. So we are delighted to have someone who is so highly interdisciplinary, who has a foot in both academy and practice. So welcome. As always, we will have about 30-35 minutes of talk, and then we'll leave time for Q&A so we can have an interaction. So let's start off. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Chan School and Karina, for your leadership here. This is really wonderful. I mean, talking about happiness and connection is really what we need to do. I'm going to start with something really, really fun. I'm going to ask you to draw really quickly here, do you want to help? If you can. A picture of a house for a 5-year-old. If a 5-year-old comes up to you and say, hey, Dad, can you draw me a house? What would you draw? Or think back 40 years ago when you were 5 and you had to draw a house. What would you draw? Just do it, and then, here you go. Just hand them out. Really, really quickly, spend 30 seconds on it. I want everyone to do one. And then if you can put your name if you want and where you come from. That'd be great. And then we'll just collect them up. Maybe, Kelsey, you can help collect them afterwards. Thanks. So what we're going to be talking about today is it's really an honor to be here because we are in game-changing times. In the 21st century, it's known as a new age because of all the science and new understanding in bio and psych that we have. This is actually slides I took from the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. In 2012, they announced that we're in a new age of biology. The woman who announced this, she's a dame of the British Empire. And she said, this is a new age of biology. The 21st century is age of biology, 20th age of chemistry and physics, 19th age of engineering. And she showed these slides. Because we forget that that there was a time when there weren't cameras, and there weren't trains, and there weren't bicycles. But they're so dominant in our life now, we forget that in the 19th century, that's when they were invented. And it changed our world. It changed our world. 20th century, age of chemistry and physics. Guess what they invented here, guys? What did they invent? Plastics. Plastics. My dad was a chemical engineer. His first job at DuPont was designing plastics. Imagine that. Now I go to the beach in Boston. What do you think I pick up? Right. So first X-rays, first computers, first credit cards split the atom. It changed what we did. It changed how we live. And now we're in another game-changing time. It's called the age of biology. In the age of biology, we now know, hey, what is this up here, guys? DNA, right? We've sequenced DNA. Harvard and MIT helped sequence it. Do you know we now know that 86% of DNA in your cell are the same as 86% of the DNA in a zebrafish? Who knew? I can't eat fish anymore. We now know that. When I went to college, they couldn't teach me that. That's 21st century. Oh, now in the Boston Marathon, you see people running on blades. Now you're an amputee. You see both men and women in the marathon. Last week they were running in the marathon. You couldn't do that in the 20th century. That's 21st century paradigm shift. They now know the genetic code of strawberries. They know how to alter it to make a red strawberry blue. I mean, it's game-changing. It's completely game-changing. It's a new lens to see our reality. So the question I had, well, what does it mean for architecture? Well, for architecture, what it means is now there are tools. In this case, I'm using eye tracking, which can actually measure how people take in famous buildings. This is Palladio's Villa Rotunda, really famous architect. Buildings like this have been copied around the world, but nobody's studied how do people actually look at it. And what you can do here is now you can study, she doesn't know her eyes move 45 times in 15 seconds. But now I have the tools with eye tracking, which projects infrared light on the eye. I can actually follow how she is looking at something. And you can see that everyone does look at the world a little differently, right? But you suddenly think, oh my gosh, look what she's doing. She doesn't realize she's doing this, but I do because I've got the tools to see inside. And what happens with eye tracking is these people are really fascinated by stats. And so they'll get, in this case, 30 or 35 people to look at it and see, oh my gosh, look where they look first, second, third, fourth, fifth. It creates heat maps, which shows where people look most and that they're more similar than you think, right? And then I suddenly realized, wait a minute, this famous building, you know what makes it so famous? If it didn't have that many statues on it, my sense is people wouldn't know it as well. Because now you're understanding how they're looking at it. It's very powerful stuff. So this is the software I used about 10 years ago. We set up a study in Boston. By the way, just so you know this, Honda, BMW, GM, Tesla are using this software. The way the business world and the car companies have bought into this tech to understand the consumer is just shocking. There are now 3 business schools in Massachusetts that are using this. UMass Amherst just opened the largest lab last year. Suffolk University on Tremont Street has a lab, and Worcester Polytechnic has a lab. So the business world knows. So you go to business school, your MBA at those schools now, you'll be talking like a biologist. Pretty amazing. And so what you just saw was eye tracking, but they'll also measure your brain waves to see if you want to approach or avoid something. They'll measure your facial expressions. They'll measure your heart rate, your sweat glands. So you can really understand the experience someone has with a product, with a car, with an ad, before it's even on the market. It's incredibly powerful tools. They're embracing our animal nature. Basically, it's what famous psychologists like Freud noticed. The mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above water. Now, Freud passed away before a lot of this tech became so available. But what did he do? He interviewed hundreds of people. And he realized that their non-conscious experience was directing their conscious behavior. Right? So that's exactly right. And what's happened now in the 21st century, what's the paradigm shift? We can see the unconscious. We can know the unconscious before the person is actually aware of it. And the way this science has jumped in our internet-based world is amazing. This is for a web design website said 95% of our brain activity is beyond our conscious awareness. That's actually right. That's actually right. And the science of that I learned about in a book by Eric Kandel, The Age of Insight. It came out in 2012. He's a Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist at Columbia Professor Emeritus. It's all about how our conscious thoughts and actions are unconscious first. Now we can see the unconscious actions. Okay, the business schools, they're right in. This is Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. She writes, she says, although many of us may think of ourselves as thinking creatures that feel, biologically we're not that. We're feeling creatures that think. It was a Harvard neuroanatomist. She had a stroke, and she watched her brain go offline as a brain scientist. And she did a TED Talk about it, and it's been viewed 25 million times. It's absolutely amazing. She's amazing. So this whole idea that emotions are something that I never mentioned in my undergrad or graduate studies is something that now I was on a supermarket checkout area, and they were selling this book, The Science of Emotions. Again, what is it? It's part of the 21st century paradigm shift, understanding how we actually function. And Harvard Business Schools, right there, they published the Emotional Intelligence series of books. They started them, I think, in 2016. There are now 28 of them, all about how emotional experience is really important to understand. I've read the one on empathy. It's really well written. And they've done studies that bosses that are seen as more empathetic, more understanding of others' emotions, guess what? They lead more successful companies. You know, it's just fascinating to me that these words, happiness, you're going to study at Harvard Business School. Again, that's the 21st century paradigm shift. Exactly what Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor is saying. We're an emotional animal that thinks. So that's really big. And so then the idea is, well, what does this mean for architecture and planning? Well, it means that you can suddenly understand how people will respond to a library, depending on its design. Will people want to wait while you park the car in front of the library or not? Your design can determine, will people take a picture of the library for a holiday card or not? You can actually predict that before your building's even built. You can ask those kind of questions. Is your architecture going to make community, make connection or not? You can now predict that. So we did this for the city of New York. It's a public library, and we eye tracked it, and she didn't realize how her eye was moving. Again, in this case, it was like 45 times in 15 seconds. And then we photoshopped out the arched windows, and we didn't tell him to do this. Again, this is what Freud says. The non-conscious is directing him to avoid looking at what? What do you avoid looking at? The blankness. See that? So as an architect, this was huge for me. I can suddenly predict, before something's even built, whether someone's going to want to linger there, whether someone's going to wait for someone, or say, hey, wait for me, and then we'll go get a coffee in front of that door. I mean, which door would you rather wait in front of? This one or this one? Yeah, I've asked 700 people that question. But they won't know why. But now I have an inkling why. It could be connected to the fact that non-consciously they anchor there. It's creating a sense of place. Right? And then, of course, you can get more hard data. It gets really, really interesting. You can see that it takes a fraction of a second longer to find the door, 0.9 seconds when there's no windows, 1.2 seconds when there's windows. But what happens, by 12 seconds, you've got half the people looking beyond the building. People are saying nothing's there. Whereas when they're the windows, they look beyond the building at 10 seconds, but then they're back at the building again. You need to be able to root. You need to be able to attach. Everything in life is about relationships and connection. That's the end of my talk right there. And now we can see it, right? This was a quick pilot study we did. This is in Somerville. A friend of mine's good in Photoshop. She Photoshopped something on this really cute Matisse-like print on a parking garage. Look where people looked. So what happens? Look at how your brain is changing how you're doing. When there's no interesting art, your brain looks down the street. When the art's there, the brain doesn't let you. And then it gets worse. Check this out, guys. This is by a company called Facet. It was called Emotion software. It measures how many times 10 people smiled in 14 seconds. 4 people smiled once here. Now look what happens. Now you can measure. This is kind of fun. How 5 people smiled 3 times in 14 seconds with the art. Look at you smile. Now when you smile, it releases oxytocin, the hugging hormone. You feel more connected. You feel happier, more relaxed. You could actually make a case that a child walking to school would be more ready to engage walking past this building than walking past that building. Okay? Then I do have a little coda about this story here. The software here was called Emotion by the company Facet was bought by a company named Apple, which immediately took it off the market. That was before Apple became a $1 trillion company. It's now a $3.5 trillion company. So companies like Apple understand you really need to understand the consumer, and they're going to buy the tech. Since then, a similar software rolled out of MIT Media Lab and called Affectiva. It's been bought by also a big company that sells biometrics to car companies, but it's still available. So you can still do this tech. It's just interesting to me how perceptive the business world is, but the planning, architecture world isn't quite there. So again, here, this is designed as a public facility, a Queen's Library. As an architect, I thought people would be fascinated by looking at the reflections. But then I realized I was wrong. We did the eye tracking study. We did this for Tufts Urban Planning. And what happens is people immediately look at the girl in the sexy yoga pose. And also I should have photoshopped out the bus, the contrasting color of the bus in the building. And then you can see pretty quickly here how it takes 14 seconds for people to see the light because there's so much going on. Look, this is called the shadow study that glows whitest where people look most. They're basically ignoring the building. Get it? Any questions? And this is fun too. This building changed hands, I think, 10 or 15 years ago. It's Hancock Tower, very famous, now owned by a big real estate company in Boston. And they then hired a French artist to do an installation of a man floating on a barge. And we decided to eye track it. And look at that. And then it made the cover of Planning magazine. And of course, the side they put it on, they're so clever, is the side that faces people driving in to Boston. So without that, people wouldn't think of renting in the old Hancock Tower. Now they do, when that was up there. It was pretty fascinating, right? So what you start learning with eye tracking is just like nature has preset what you need to drink, water, what you need to breathe, air. It's preset what you need to see. And then when you read books like Eric Kandel's book, you learn that more of the brain is devoted to visual processing of the face than any other object, all right? That's what's so interesting. So you learn that. And when I show you these pictures, anyone remember what was on the previous slide? What was it? What did the writing say? Couldn't get it. What was the image on the coffee cup? Eyes? A face? Yep. Well, now you know the essence of all Apple advertising and logos. It takes the brain 60,000 times longer to read letters. They know that the more letters, so the Apple logo is just an apple. 60,000 times longer. And the more writing in an ad, the less people will read it. So you see big Apple posters, they'll maybe have 15, 14, iPhone 16, that's all they'll say. You know, that there's a reason for that. They're understanding how humans work, and they're understanding to be successful in business, you need to connect, and they're understanding how to connect. It's all about connection, okay? So, yeah. Okay. So the brain really prioritizes faces, and some painters have understood this. This guy's works in the Louvre, Giuseppe Arcimboldo, and this is, it's actually a face. He's such a good painter, he had someone pose for this painting. Can you imagine? And so you can read this as a face, but it takes a little longer as an upside-down face. Do you see how quickly your brain gets that? Isn't that amazing, the difference? It's not random. We now know that, again, I'm quoting this guy. This is what he taught me. The brain reconstructs reality according to its own biological rules. The template for the face, the figural primitive, is in your brain by the 3rd trimester in utero. They've now done studies projecting images of faces upright and upside down to pregnant women, 3rd trimester, and babies start to kick when they see an upright face. That's what we need to see. So big business knows what we need to see. The guys at Amazon know exactly which book cover works because they track what people are clicking on. Welcome to our world, guys. The number 1 thing that people click on is the human face. The number 2 thing is a pet face. So when I did the first edition of my book, I put a face on it. For the second edition, I showed the publisher that this is where people looked. And on the second edition of the book, they put the same face. Exactly on the second edition of the book. Get it, guys? So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty fun. Oh, so the Amazon logo, not at all random. It's a smile. Non-consciously, they now know the blood veins and the area of your brain that is specifically designed to see smiles. You're going to feel connection and attached when you see a smile, even if the package is for your husband. It doesn't matter. You're going to feel it. And then the business world, they're right into this. The amount of businesses that have faces, as logos, it makes no sense. I mean, okay, Gerber baby food, I get it, but everything has to have a face. Well, why? That's what we're built to see. Human perception's relational. And then this was the result of a house experiment I did. I collected in 2018 700 people about, and it didn't matter where people came from. I don't know what you guys did, but I'm looking forward to see what you did. What did you guys do? Oh, there, let me see. Look, you did excellent. She did it. She did the same thing. Well, why? Because it's exactly what the neuroscientist, Nobel Prize winner said, Eric Kandel, that's the figural primitive. It's the non-conscious directing you. It's preset. Because the survival on the savannah was so intense, nature has to preset what we need to come together as a social species. Make sense, guys? Okay, and the car companies study this, and they know a lot about this. And so it's not random. Like I saw this car a couple years ago. I thought, oh my God, it's so cute. Even the rear end of the car. And yeah, the car companies study this. There's a Wall Street Journal article I can forward to you from 2007 called Why Cars Got Angry. How they realized people were feeling less in control of their lives, so they wanted a car that had a more angry front facade. And then the people who design robots study this. This is from actually a German a magazine that talks about how to design robots, and what this guy was saying is the perception of faces or face-like patterns is more critical than previously thought for how humans perceive the aesthetics of the environment and the architecture of house facades. It all makes sense, right? He's barely echoing what Kandel also tells us. We're hardwired for one specific thing to be able to read faces. So as an architect, this was great. It made me understand traditional architecture differently. This is a World Heritage Site in Salamanca, Spain. And again, in the Middle Ages, people were not literate. It makes perfect sense. They'd want the 12 apostles to be looking at you. You'd feel connected. And this is an Apple store in Greater Boston. They're doing the exact same thing. Now, Steve Jobs was hiring neuroscientists in the 1970s already. And so you walk to the Apple store, the face looking at you, the face smiling at you, what you need to see. Apple store a couple years later, exact same design. It's all the same. Steve had this great quote, the broader one's understanding of the human experience, the better design you will have. What he's talking about is the non-conscious human experience. So it's not at all random, like nothing is random about the Apple store design. When you walk in, there's these giant tables with like 10 pounds of iPhones on them. Do you need a table that big? Yeah. The way the human brain works, the heavier something is, you're going to think the thing on it's more important. So Queen Elizabeth II was always on a throne. You never saw her on a folding chair, right? Right, that's it. And then there's something called the endowment effect in psychology. To survive on the savannah, when we touch something, we would take it home, and we would make it ours. So they're doing the same thing. It allowed us to survive. So we touch the iPhone, even if we weren't looking for one, we'll feel it's ours. That's how your brain works. So that's basically it. So that's it. Survival. The extent our brain is wired for survival this way is really shocking. A couple of weeks ago, my cat brought in a dead snake in the middle of the living room. And I thought, cat, what did you do? So I put the snake outside, and then I called a friend, and I started to scream. I said, there was a snake. It was in my living room. And then I looked it up online. It turns out there's a special nerve in your brain because primates and monkeys were fighting with snakes so much in the savannah. We've developed a nerve in our brain just for seeing snakes. And that's why I started screaming. And it's still in our brain. Survival. So our ancestors that didn't have the face obsession, didn't have the figural primitive of the face, they didn't survive. Okay? This is from a Harvard Business Review article. Humans are Pleistocene. You can take the person out of the Stone Age, but you can't take the Stone Age out of the person. And I know Kelsey has heard me say this before. The lead designer for the Lincoln car was told he had to come up with a new design for the car because of COVID. You know what he said? When you get into the new Lincoln, you will feel like you're hugged by your mother. Again, it's exactly what Nigel Nicholson's saying. We're a Stone Age primate, and they know that. Also, this is very important, too. We're built to be mirrored and looked at. Okay. So what happens if a building or streetscape? This is really fun, too, that the Harvard Lampoon building is often photographed. I've seen Asian tour buses stop at the side, and they take pictures. People get out, because it gives a sense that they're here, right? So what happens if a building doesn't have a face? So this building, this is very famous, by Frank Gehry, opened in 1997. The museum directors realized, oh no, we got to have this puppy installed before it opened. And so a group of people at MIT, I know, they recently visited. Where do you think they stopped for their photo? Around the puppy. Again, it's the non-conscious telling you this is where the entrance is. This is really funny. I just saw this in New York last month. My husband was running the half marathon there, and I just couldn't believe it. This is in front of a children's hospital, and it's an actual Toyota car without a motor. But the hospital realized it didn't feel good, so they had to put something fun in front of the door. It makes sense. And this is in Cambridge, and when this building opened, they put giant pictures of people around it, because the building's too blank, right? So then I'll just talk about this really quickly. So how did modern architecture become so blank? What happened? Why did it become so mechanically oriented? And you can now do studies. This is a plugin for Photoshop, 3M Visual Attention Software. This building's in Cambridge on Spark Street. It's at school now, an old carriage house. You can see non-consciously people immediately will see it. I put it on the second edition of my book. Whereas this library here, another Queen's library, non-consciously people aren't going to look at it. They're going to look at the red fire hydrant. That's it. And so to answer that question, you have to figure out who are the fathers of modern architecture. Does anyone know? Yeah? Okay, go on, Kelsey. Le Corbusier. And when they were all in their late 20s or 30, what happened? What?
They moved to the U.S.?
No, not yet. World War I. So World War I. So, and the impact of World War I is contemporary. PBS did in honor of the centenary. They talked about that. And the impact of World War I is contemporary. It led to World War II, and then it may be leading to future wars, right? 20 million deaths, industrialized warfare. A Boston painter was actually paid to go paint. And this painting traveled. He did it in 1919 after the war in his London studio. And this painting of American and UK soldiers fighting together was actually went around the United States, right? first tanks, World War I. But the big idea now, 21st century paradigm shift, understanding we now have magnetic resonance imaging, which unlike X-ray can see soft tissue. You can see how trauma changes the brain. The brain shrinks. It can't process visual stimuli the same way. Again, we didn't know that. Post-traumatic stress disorder wasn't even a word until 1980 in the doctor's manual. They would say shell shock, but they didn't know what PTSD did. They didn't know. Again, they didn't know. Now there's a trauma conference in Boston in May that's attended by the leading leading psychologists all around the world. It's happening in like 2 weeks. So trauma changes your brain. So this guy runs a trauma conference. He's based in Boston, Bessel van der Kolk. Body Keeps the Score, New York Times bestseller since 2014. And what you can see here is, what you can see here is that a remarkable insight is you start understanding that what we express externally reflects internal brain structure. Just like that template for the face is in you before birth, the structure of our hidden internal world. Because reality is a construct between eye and brain, not only the way we live, but the way we choose to build our buildings reflects hidden internal brain design that we may not know we carry, yet unconsciously are already responding to. Just like the people here, you didn't realize you'd be all drawing the same thing. Or most of you would do this. It's unconscious, what you're doing. Right. So Walter Gropius, that Harvard hired in the 1930s to teach Bauhaus modern architecture, he designed his house. Harvard wanted him to live in Cambridge. He said no. He chose a remote place in Lincoln, about 10 miles from here. And the house it looks like a bunker. This is a World War I bunker, and it's now a historic monument. And the bodies of World War I soldiers are in it, and they've let trees grow around it. So that's what happens. So this is called reenactment, where your brain, they now know in PTSD, you start replaying what happened as your brain tries to recover from it. Again, this is 21st century science. All right. So this building is the house directly across the street. This is Gropius's house. Which building is more inviting to walk towards? Which building where people struggle to find the front door? Yeah, exactly. Right. And then this is where it gets really fascinating, where this is, again, reenactment. This is an actual drawing of a World War I trench. This is what he recreated in his study, 3,000 miles away from where he saw action. He was in World War I for 4 years. And then he also laid out his bedroom like the way the dugouts where men would sleep in the trenches. They wouldn't actually sleep in the trench. They'd have a sturdy doorway. They'd sleep behind it. So then he creates an aisle and a doorway and sleeps behind the doorway. It's pretty wild. And there's a kind of randomness. This is actual trench that's been recreated in Stoneash. You can go see the American Heritage Museum. They've recreated a World War I trench. And there's kind of a randomness in design. In Gropius's house, you walk in, and traditional siding is placed vertically. What? It's a randomness. So I did present this at 2 medical conferences, and I got no pushback. And it actually gave me trauma. It actually gave me trauma. So, and what I did too is I then spoke to some medical experts, because I'm not a doctor. And what they said to me, if you never told me you lived here, I could tell this person has been traumatized. What's this person doing? I can tell this person has been traumatized, said Michael Kramer, a clinical psychologist at the PTS clinic in New York. It's a house built for safety. It's classic PTSD. So your brain's need for safety non-consciously is directing you. Just like your brain's need to see faces non-consciously directed most of you to draw a building that looked like a face. It's the non-conscious directing you. Every trauma expert we contacted reiterate this point of view. With the house parallels you show, it's obvious that Jim Hopper, PhD, a trauma psychologist at Harvard Medical School. In looking at Gropius' house as a direct expression of how trauma works, added Ashley Dukas, PhD, World Trade Center Health Clinic at NYU School of Medicine. So that's it. It's kind of amazing that it's something, it's a new way to think about it. And what about Le Corbusier? Le Corbusier was too blind to serve, but he did come up with this style of architecture that is everywhere. And these 5 points of architecture are still taught. He came up with this. And these doctors have corroborated his autism spectrum diagnosis. Again, the 21st century paradigm shift. This is amazing. A member of my family's on the autism spectrum. When he looked at the cat, this is how he looked at it. 30 neurotypical people looked at the cat. That's how they looked at it. Now, at 12 months, you can do eye tracking and determine if an infant is on the autism spectrum and where they are. The 21st century paradigm shift. You couldn't do this in 1980. Okay? And there's a lot of this on the web, too. Okay? So even an elephant, the neurotypical will immediately start trying to find the eyes. The autistic goes beyond. So when you look at this, the autistic person looked right at the center. The neurotypical avoids that. Your brain doesn't want you to do that. It's looking for you to securely attach. All right? And so this is Le Corbusier's architecture. Get it? 21st century paradigm shift. It's game-changing. You know, it's as game-changing as in the 19th century. Do you know doctors didn't used to wash their hands? They didn't know about germs. It's not till the 1870s they start washing their hands. What? That's crazy. It's a paradigm shift. It's another paradigm shift. Okay? So that's it. So, again, war gave us our world. So that's basically it. Impact of World War I, architecture becomes avoidant. The non-conscious directs you. So these are buildings all in Greater Boston, most now protected by historic bylaws. You cannot change them unless you go to court. And they give Boston its identity. And so basically, that's basically, I'm wrapping up here. We've got like 5 minutes for questions. But what's really interesting, too, is how this is changing psychology and childcare. This understanding of the brain's needs for connection. This is a doctor writing about how children are treated in childhood, how that impacts their longevity as an adult. And she writes, when you know the mechanism, you can use that understanding in countless ways to drastically improve the human condition. That is how you spark a revolution. You shift the frame, you change the lens, and all at once the world is revealed and nothing is the same. It's the way the microscope changed medicine. It's the way I think eye tracking, biometrics are going to change how we design our schools and hospitals. Right? It's really important. So welcome to the new age of biology, guys. Let's take it away. When I give architecture talks, I have to have learning objectives, explain the importance of human unconscious. The unconscious fixations determine where we'll go, what we'll do. Demonstrate that the human brain is oriented to visual processing, geared to taking in faces. Okay. And this is from when you start using these biometric tools, you learn that our responses aren't intellectual at all. What's happening before we even know what we look at, our facial expression, our pupil dilation, our respiration, our skin conducts, our heart rate's already responded. If that weren't the case, we couldn't have survived on the savannah. Get it, guys? So that's basically it. Again, the 21st century paradigm shift. We're hardwired. There's something called the thalamus. It's a relay station in your brain. Before you know what you look at, your brain is ready to alert the amygdala. That's where the cortisol comes out, get you in fight or flight. Before you even know what you're looking at. It had to be that way or we couldn't have survived. So there's all this new science, it's like 20 years about, it's like exploding. There's a lot of interest. We are publishing. We were asked to co-edit a book for Routledge. They're a major international publisher, the Handbook of Neuroscience of the Built Environment. And I'm not supposed to come out in August. And you recognize that heat map? I'm using the same one. And we had, believe it or not, 51 authors for 30 chapters from 4 continents contribute. So I'd be happy to give you a flyer about the book. And here's some of our other research using the eye tracking, facial expression analysis. This was published in a peer-reviewed Journal of Applied Sciences. So this is it's kind of interesting how traditional architecture basically, in a Harris poll, 72% of Americans said that they preferred it for civic buildings. And then you can start to understand why biologically, non-consciously, the brain makes you focus on it. The modern architecture doesn't have the detail. And this also is how interior, you can design. This came out recently. They now have emotional heat maps, which will show where people smiled when they look at something. So this office, nobody smiled. This office, when you added the art, you can tell where people smile. You can actually influence their emotional experience. So I think I've talked enough, but I did want to tell you about this. We are, for the first time in over 15 years, there'll be the AIA, American Institute of Architects National Convention in Boston. It's happening at the BCEC, the Boston Convention Hall in downtown Boston. And you can get in for free. With this discount code, just go to conferencearchitecture.com, register. You can get in for free. It's only for 2 days. It's only Thursday and Friday. But they expect 15,000 people, 600 vendors or people will be there on the main floor because we want to try to, that's why I'm really talking here. I need your help. How do we get the science out? How do we start understanding it's okay to be an animal?